Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. Today I'm going to sew along with you the Melanie bag by Catsiopeia Patterns. Let me show you some of the amazing features of this bag. So you can see it's a super classy looking bag. This one I have made in Mora faux leathers. It features metal handles. These ones are from Brandy. And it was awesome because I could add in some of the color of the faux leather I'm using. Underneath this flap, we have a sort of a recessed zipper. It's more on top, but it's like a recessed zipper. A lining zipper pocket and two slip pockets. It's a medium-sized bag. What can I tell you? I don't know. It was a boisterous beginner to intermediate level bag to sew, I would say myself. I mean, if you're a beginner, just take it slow, follow along, and you should have no problems with it. You can make this in leathers, faux leathers, or vinyls, cottons, whatever you like. Just know what your machine limitations are when you're choosing your fabrics. What I used in this is the mustard Mora faux leather from Amaan bags. All my hardware, well, most of my hardware is from Amaan bags. My zipper and zipper pulls are from Blue Calla. These metal handles are from Brandy, all Canadian suppliers. My lining fabric, I don't know. It was in my scrap bin with no salvages. You know me with those. Yeah, this is a really fun make. If you're watching this later on, we did have a class on this in October 2022. So if you would like a slowed down version of doing this, you can definitely join the membership side and see the replays of these classes. If it's after October 2022, that is. What else? Interfacings in this bag. I used main stabilizer was foam. I used Pretty in Pink Sew from Galaxy Customs, which is similar to a Pellon Flex Foam or a Bustle Foam or a Bayani Soft and Stable. All of my exterior or lining pieces, my cotton pieces, are all backed with EB Fuse Light from Amaan bags, which is like an SF101 or a medium woven interfacing. I have Decaville Heavy as a stabilizer in the bottom. I believe that's all there is for stabilizer in this. Anyways, how about we get to making... Oh, wait. So in this video, I show you two ways of doing it. You can see this one's nice and square, and that's because I went around and I top stitched all around this gusset. This is an option in the pattern for finishing. It does get kind of thick right up in these areas, so it's all based on whether you can get that under your presser foot of your machine and that it can handle that thickness, or the first option is you don't do that and then you get more of a rectangular looking, like it's a little bit wider of a bag. I do show you how to do both methods in this video. Mistakes I made in this video, I learned a lot from it, is you have to take into account the width of your handles when they're side by side. The pattern has thinner handles, so I had to redo this opening in the flap so I could get both through. I explain how to do that depending on what handles you are using. If you don't want to use metal handles, this is an awesome crossbody bag. You would just omit the hole in the flap and the handles and it's good to go. It's a very versatile pattern. So how about we get to making this bag? You are going to need some number 5 zipper tape, 2 D-rings, a slider, 2 swivel clasps, 2 zipper pulls, a zipper end, your nameplate, magnetic snap, optional strap ends, optional purse feet. You're also going to need 2 metal holders or handles here. You can also leave these off just for a crossbody strap as well as rivets. Please note for directional fabric measurements are height by width in this pattern. All right, so I have my typical overlay and accent for my slip pockets, my crossbody piece, my 4 handle connector pieces, 4 zipper panels, 2 crossbody connectors, my slip pocket, zipper pocket lining pieces, 2 flap facings, exterior and lining bottom pieces. I also put deckable heavy outside of the seam allowances on my exterior base. Your 4 side gusset pieces, 2 lining, 2 exterior. Your lining and exterior flap pieces. Your front exterior slip pocket, exterior and lining pieces, and your main panels, 2 exterior, 2 lining. And foam will be our main stabilizer here. I'm going to go ahead and do my crossbody strap off camera. If you need a class for that, it's down below in the description. Okay, so now we're going to work on our crossbody connector pieces. I have drawn a line down the center of these. I am using some double-sided tape. If your machine does not like double-sided tape, definitely use clips instead. Just know what your machine can handle. What we're going to do is fold these long edges of each of these crossbody connectors into that center line. And we're going to take our D-ring and a little bit of double-sided tape outside of where our top stitching will be. Place it about 1/2 inch up from the bottom and fold each raw edge in once you put the D-ring in to the back center of this, wrong sides together to create our crossbody strap. I'm going to also measure down about 3/4 inch from where the fold is, where our connector is, and this will be for later on when we go to sew this on as a guide. All right, as I said before, I went ahead and I put a piece of deckable heavy in the bottom of this outside of the seam allowances, and this isn't in the pattern, but I decided I wanted to add in purse feet. So I am measuring in 2 inches from the short ends and 1.5 inches up from the long ends, and I'm placing 4 here. Now I decided it actually needs one in the middle as well, so I'm going to put another one centered right here. If you need a class on how to install purse feet, that is down below in the description. Okay, so that is all done. Now we're going to take our bottom 2 sides flap and your main pieces, and we're going to attach them to foam. Now this is a new trick that I have learned from a friend, where I have kept the foam 1/4 inch bigger or so than the pieces we are basting the foam onto, and I will show you here momentarily why this works so well. This was a hint that I got from Anna from Galaxy Customs, who we know is an upholsterer as well, and this tip is so helpful to getting the foam nicely out of the seam allowances or out of the edges of our panels here, and I'll show you here momentarily what we're going to do. So having that little bit extra, you can see here I've already started to trim it, but having that little bit extra gives you something to hold onto. So when you go to trim your sew-in foam, you can get it so nice and close to your stitching so you don't have as much bulk in that seam allowance as you see I'm doing here. Like, look at that, perfection. So go ahead and do that with all of your pieces. Okay, now we're going to work on our magnetic snaps. So we're going to take the female end of our magnetic snap and our exterior front slip pocket piece. Use your pattern piece for your magnetic snap placement. And then you're going to go with the flap lining piece. Once again, using your pattern as a guide where you will be putting the male side of your magnetic snap. Once you have those marked out, go ahead and install as per your manufacturer's instructions. I also like to back mine with a small scrap of deckable heavy for added support, and then I like to just kind of bang it with a mallet a little bit to make sure it's nice and tight, and place some double-sided tape over top of those prongs. All right, now we need to do our handle cutouts here. You can use your pattern piece here. I actually find out later on in the pattern, because my handles that I have chosen are quite a bit wider than the ones in the pattern, I end up having to cut this hole bigger later on. If you're using the same handles as the pattern, definitely use this here. I used the Bringberry handles and they were quite a bit wider, so I ended up having to draw these lines on at 6 inches wide and 1 inch high. So I have not done that yet here. I do discover it later on and I have to fix it. So if you're using the Bringberry handles like me, you will be drawing right here nice and centered, 6 inches wide and 1 inch high. This is really easy to modify as you go depending on your handles. You want to make sure that these are exactly the same on both the linings piece and on the exterior pieces, nice and centered. Of course, we mark these on the back side, not on the front sides. I'm just measuring to make sure they are definitely the same. Okay, so then what you want to do is take your exterior flat piece, and we want to just cut away the foam of that rectangle we just drew, being very careful not to cut away any of your vinyl. We're just doing the foam here. So cut out that rectangle. And then we are going to put these right sides together to make sure that they do line up. Okay, now I'm going to take a piece of my flat facing and we are going to put it right sides together with our exterior flat, placing this nice and centered over top of that hole that we just cut. I put tape just in the middle where the hole is to hold it in place. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to sew inside of the foam. If that makes sense, we're not sewing through the foam, we're just sewing kind of right beside the foam. And to be able to do that, I'm going to put in my left zipper foot so I can get nice and close to that foam without sewing through the foam. So you're going to place your zipper foot right up against the cutout of the foam and go all the way around that rectangle. So this is sewing through the vinyl piece as well as the facing that we have attached to the other side. Okay, so you can see here I did not sew through my foam, but I have my facing all placed here. Now on the facing side, I'm going to measure in from the short-ended stitches, 1/2 inch. And this is just like when we do a zipper. And then measure up 1/4 inch up in between those 1/2 inch lines and then do your V's out. And then we're going to cut this away. So I like to go in with my rotary cutter first and then go in with my scissors, cut into those V's as close as you can to the stitching without cutting the stitching. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to flip the facing through the hole, wrong sides together. Give this a good press if you can. And my press didn't quite do what I wanted, so I'm actually going to use some double-sided tape outside of the seam allowances to work as a pressing agent here to fold that nice and taut away from there. I also went ahead and repeated for the lining side, doing the exact same thing. Now you can see here I finally discovered that I did not do a hole wide enough, so I went back and I corrected that so my handles, when they're side by side, will fit together. Next thing we want to do is take our lining pieces and we want to line up that opening. It is very, very crucial and important that the opening for the handles here matches up no matter what. So I'm just going to put some clips in there, making sure they all line up. And then once that's done, go ahead and clip all the way around with our pieces right sides together, of course. And then we're going to sew this in place. Now, if they're off just a little bit, that is okay. As long, on these sides that I'm clipping now, as long as that opening is matched up perfectly. So we're going to go ahead and sew around here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, leaving the top straight edge open for turning. I'm going to go ahead and take off my zipper foot now and put my standard foot back on. Once that is all done, go ahead and take these clips out. And I chose this flap with the pointed corners, so I'm just going to kind of cut my corners at an angle here without cutting my stitching to help get nice sharp corners on my flap. And then go ahead and turn this right side out. Now, once again, we want to go and secure this opening with clips. We just really don't want this to shift when we are doing our our top stitching, as we really need this to always line up. So this just ensures that it holds that in place before we do our top stitching. Once you have that secured, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to roll the seams in between my fingers here. I'm going to secure them with clips, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, once again leaving the top open. Once that is done, you can once again remove all of those clips. And then I want to install my nameplate at the bottom of my flap here. So in order to do that, I'm going to kind of mark where I want it to be, about a 1/2 inch or so up, centered from the bottom straight edge here. I think that will be perfect. And then I'm going to reach in through the opening and install it just through the vinyl piece, not through the lining. So that is all done. Now you can go ahead and use clips again here. I'm going to go ahead and use some double-sided tape to secure these 2 layers together for preparation of top stitching of our handle hole. You want to make sure they line up as perfect as we can. And what we're going to do is we're going to go around this rectangle. We're going to top stitch with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to go in once more with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance top stitch to make sure that this is nice and secure. Now, as I went here, I noticed that some of my double-sided tape wasn't necessarily holding up, so make sure you just kind of watch that they're nice and even and adjust as you go. Once that's done, go ahead and go in with another round of top stitching, an 1/8 of an inch away from that row of top stitching, or a 1/4 of an inch away from the open sides of the rectangle. Okay, that's done. Now you can go ahead and you can baste the top closed. I'm just double checking that my handles do fit in there, and they do. So yes, go ahead and baste across here to close that up. Now that that's done, we're going to find the center of the raw edge of our flap. We are going to take one of our main exterior pieces, find the top and bottom centers. And from the top side, we are going to measure down as per the pattern. I believe it was 4.5 inches from the top. I'm using my chalk to draw a line, and I'm also going to draw my center straight down to that line. Make sure it is definitely centered. Now we're going to take our flap. I'm going to put some double-sided tape right along that raw edge on the right side. And then place this right sides together, centered right across that line with that raw edge pointing towards the top of the bag, like so. Okay, and then go ahead and sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You want to make sure your stitching does not go past the flap because we do not want it to show onto the main panel. You just want it through the slap or through the flap. Then we're going to fold our flap up like this, top stitch that with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the fold, and then go back in with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance away from that 1/8 of an inch top stitch. And what this is doing is enclosing the raw edge of that flap. So here is an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from that fold line. And then go in again a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from that top stitch we just did, or approximately 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from the fold. Once again, making sure you are only starting your stitching and stopping your stitches on the flap and not starting and stopping them on the main panel past the flap. So I'm kind of starting and stopping where my flap top stitching was. That was a good guide for me. Okay, once that is done, I actually went ahead and installed 3 rivets for security. I double checked that I had no raw edge showing, and that is done. Now we're going to work on our main front panel. We are going to do our slip pockets on the top of our exterior pieces. We're going to measure in about 2 inches from each side. We're going to place the lining and the exterior right sides together and clip in place. And then we're going to go ahead and from those lines that we just drew, we are going to sew all the way around with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, leaving that very top part that we have marked unsewn for turning. Once that is done, at my corners here, I'm going to cut them on an angle, being careful not to cut through my stitching. And I'm going to take my pinking shears and just cut around the corners so we can get nice rounded corners when we turn this out. Once that is done, go ahead and turn it right side out through the opening in the top of the slip pocket. Actually, first, I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape along the seam and fold the seam open like so on both sides. Again, you can do this with an iron if you want, or give it a good finger press if your machine does not like double-sided tape. This is just going to help give us a nice seam for when we go and top stitch this opening shut. Now you can go ahead and turn this right side out. You can see how that has made it. So our raw edges are already folded in. Poke out those seams nicely in the corners and around those curves. Use a chopstick or a pokey tool or whatever to poke out those corners. And then what we're going to do, where we have those folded over edges, we're going to go ahead and we are going to top stitch across just the top straight edge with 1/8 of an inch top stitch seam allowance. Okay, so that is done. Now we're going to take our front main panel, once again find our centers of the top and the bottoms. And we are going to place our pocket. Again, I'm using double-sided tape to hold this in place. You can also hold this in place with your hands. And from the bottom edge, we are going to measure up 1 inch and we are going to place the slip pocket nice and centered along there. Now it's very important we get the centering right because we want our magnetic snap from the flap and this to match up once the bag is done. So do make sure it is definitely centered. Check 2 or 3 times if you need to as well. Once that's complete, we're going to go ahead and top stitch around the 3 edges that have not been top stitched yet. Do not top stitch along that top part because we do not want to close up our slip pocket, just around the 3 edges. All right, so that is our front main panel done. Actually, I decided that I wanted to go for another row of decorative stitching all the way around. So I went in again with another row of top stitching 1/8 of an inch away from that first row of top stitching. That is completely optional. This is just what I thought would look really nice, as well as add added security to this slip pocket, as it will be used quite often, having things go in and out of it. Okay, so I also went ahead and put in 2 rivets for decoration right in the sides here, as well as for extra security. Next, we are going to work on our side gusset pieces. We want to find the top centers along that straight edge. And from those centers, nice and we're going to take our crossbody connectors that we made previously, put a little bit of double-sided tape centered outside of our 1/8 of an inch seam allowances, and put it 1 inch down centered from that top center mark. So that 1 inch mark will line up with the fold of our connector, like so. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch this in place using that 3/4 of an inch line we drew before as a guide where we will go across. I'm pulling my strings long because I don't want to have a backstitched mark here, so I am not backstitching. I pulled my threads long, continuing on with my top stitching, going across that 3/4 inch line that we drew previously. Using a piece of scrap to protect my hardware. At this point, I am pulling on my starting bobbin thread to pull my top thread through, then continuing on. And then when I come to the end, I'm going to make sure that my needle lands in the first starting hole, pull my threads along again, tug on that bobbin thread to pull the top thread loop through, tie off these 4 strands with 3 or 4 knots to secure. And this gives us a nice seamless top stitch with no backstitching bulk of thread at the start and stop. So I've done that with both, and I've secured with 2 rivets in each. Now we're going to work on our little darts here. So you're going to bring those raw edges together like so. You'll do this on the lining pieces as well. And so across each of those with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now once we have those darts, we want to just kind of match up those darts and find the center of each of those pieces, and we can set those aside for now. Okay, so now I adjusted my connector pieces as well, so they are as wide as the bottom of my metal connectors here. So again, that's an adjustment that you can make as per the metal connectors you decide to use. You're going to take 2 pieces, put them wrong sides together like so. And then we are going to take our marking pens and we are going to draw an X from corner to corner. And we're going to go ahead and top stitch these together with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around and then across our X's. If they don't match up perfectly, that is okay. We will be trimming these up nice and even here shortly. So I'm first doing the perimeter. Once that's done, I'm going to go back down the X's and I'm double sewing or double top stitching across the long edges, as they will not be seen, as they will be stuck in the seam allowances once the handles are sewn to the bag. So you'll do the same with the other 2. Okay, once that's done, go ahead and trim these up nice and even with one another. And what this is giving us is a really nice straight edge on the short edges, as I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edge paint just the short edges as they are going to show in the bag. So that is all done here. We want to find the centers of our long sides, so I'm going ahead and doing that. Then we're going to take our metal handle and loop them in like so. Kind of like how we do a D-ring in a way, clipping the raw edges of our connector together and basting that in place. So that is complete. Okay, now we're going to work on our zipper panels. So with our zipper panels, we're going to measure in 3/4 of an inch from each short end. You can use clips, you can press these depending on what you're using for your textile. I like to use double-sided tape, but I am on an industrial which can handle this. We're going to fold those short ends into that line, which is going to give us about a 3/8 of an inch folded in seam, like so. Do that with all 4. You want to make sure they are all the same size, and you can put those aside for now. Now we're taking our length of zipper tape. On the wrong side of one of the short ends, you're going to measure in 1 inch. This is going to help us put our zipper pull on nice and even later on. On the opposite side, we are going to fold each side down by 90 degrees or so, like so. So I'm kind of just folding it down upon itself and securing with the pin. This is creating our zipper pull stop or zipper stop. Once we have those nice and even, you're going to go ahead and baste these curves in place. So you will notice I do not have my pull on at this time. We will put that on later on. Okay, so that is done. Now we're going to take one of our zipper panels, and from the left-hand side, we're going to do a mark about 3/8 of an inch in. Again, use tape or use clips here if your machine does not like tape. I'm going to use the tape. Pull your zipper pull apart. You can go ahead and trim off that little wing like so, so it's nice and even with the zipper tape. And we want our zipper panel right side up and our zipper right side up, and you're going to match that curvy part up with that 3/8 of an inch line that we just drew and stick it in place. Take another zipper panel. Once again, you can use clips here, and you're going to use some tape or clips. Put these right sides together, sandwiching that double-sided tape, making sure our zipper panel matches up perfectly. If one ends up being a little bit longer, go ahead and even them up, like I am doing here. And then we're going to sew this across with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. The other side of the zipper panel, you'll do the same thing, but you will be starting from the right-hand side, 3/8 of an inch in. Once again, everything is right side up here. This is a good time to put on your right zipper foot. This will ensure that you can get nice and close to your teeth with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here, as well as give you a nice straight, even seam for a straight zipper. Takes no time to change into a zipper foot. I strongly recommend it. Okay, go ahead and sew across these zipper panels with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that is done, you want to finger press or press these panels wrong sides together. I'm once again going to go in with my double-sided tape because I love my double-sided tape to use as my pressing agent here to get a nice and tight seam that will not move as I press it away from my zipper teeth. But once again, make sure your machine can handle it before you go ahead and use the double-sided tape. Bring them wrong sides together. And I'm going to clip the side pieces, making sure that they're nice and even, as well as the bottom raw edges, as we will be basting those together. So I'm going to take this to the machine, top stitch up the two short edges and across the zipper tape and baste along the bottom. Okay, once they're both done, you want to make sure that they line up perfectly because that will make sure that when we go to do this, that our zipper is on nice and even. Along the raw edges, find your center by pulling or putting your zipper panels in half like so and doing small marks or clips like so. Once again, making sure they line up with those center marks, which mine do. Now we're going to work on our bottom. So we're going to take our bottom panel and we're going to find the centers of both the long sides as well as the short sides. Again, I like to do just little teeny tiny snips within the seam allowance. And then we're going to put this right sides together with one of our main panels, nice and centered. We'll start with the flap. And then we're going to go in and we are going to sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure your flap is not hanging down and getting caught in this. Next, what we want to do is we want to press that seam towards the bottom panel of this, and then we are going to top stitch through the bottom panel to hold that seam in place. You'll repeat this exact same thing with the opposite main panel. Once we have that all done, next we are going to work on our side gusset. So we already have our centers marked. We're going to mark the bottom of our gusset centers with the bottom short end centers and clip these in place. If you can, try to press these pleat or dart seams open. Once you have a couple secured there, go ahead and bring the top edges together of one of the main panels and do the same with the other main panel. And then go ahead and clip the rest of the way, evenly distributing the fabric in between the clips. Then we're going to go ahead and sew this in place with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we will do the exact same thing with the opposite side. Okay, so now that that's done, so I want to reduce some of this bulk in these top corners. So I'm just pulling out some of my basting stitches from when we put the foam on, just down about an inch or so, and then cutting away that excess foam. This is really going to help, especially if you're on a domestic machine when it comes to sewing this together, or when we do the top stitching here, just reduces some of that top bulk, as we don't want our walking feet to accidentally eat up our vinyl. So I've done that on all four corners. You can go ahead and turn this right side out. Admire your work so far. It looks so good. Make sure the flap lines up and we're golden. Now we're going to take our handles and we are going to match up those center snips that we made with the center markings of our top main panels. Clip those in place. And we're going to baste those in place. You'll do the same with the back side. Now this is a little bit thick. I am using vinyl. If your machine does not like thicknesses, I would strongly recommend that you do the fabric version for these connectors when you do them, if you're worried about going through this thickness. Now that that's done, we're going to add to that thickness with our zipper panels. Now we want to make it so our zipper pull is closing to the left. So the 90-degree angle is facing to the left on the front side here. You're going to match up those center marks, clip it in place. Do the same with the back side, but the curvy part will be facing the right, the opposite side. That way we know that we're nice and even. Once again, right sides together. And then we're going to go ahead and baste these in place as well. Now my flatbed, I do find it easier to go ahead and baste this part from the inside of the bag. Which you will see me do here. Okay, now that that's done, I just want to make sure that my zipper is nice and even before I go further in case I need to take this apart. So this is how I do it. Remember those 2 lines that we had on the back of our zipper tape? I'm putting that into my handy dandy homemade zipper jig, which is really just a fork on a little vise. I'm going to put these through the zipper until that line lines up nice and even. That line, this just makes it so you don't have to zip all the way up to see if you're even. If that line matches up, you know you will be straight. So go ahead and zip it up, and our zipper is perfection. Go ahead, take the pull off again. Okay, so I already went ahead and I did my lining pockets because I do them different than the pattern. This is my standard way of doing it. If you need a class on how I do them, that's down below in the description. Just make sure you leave the zipper pocket open. Right, so we're going to go ahead and we are going to do our bottom pieces. I've already sewn on the one side, leaving an opening in the bottom. The difference is with these from the other is we are sewing with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance rather than a 3. So here's our bottom pieces. I'm not top stitching these because we have that opening there, but I am going to go ahead and press these seams open. So that is done. Once again, we have the opening in the bottom. I forgot to find the centers of my lining bottom piece, so I'm just quickly doing that, and then we're going to go ahead and put on our side pieces. So these go on in the same manner as the exterior with one difference. So from the top to about where I put those lines, so about 2.5, 3 inches or so, we're going to go 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to branch out around the bottom and the curve with the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance until we get to the other side where I drew that little line, 2.5, 3 inches down, and then branch in again to a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, like we have done here. What that does is it keeps the opening of the bag the same width around as the exterior, but makes the lining slightly smaller near the bottom so we don't have a saggy lining once the bag is installed. So we have the opening in the bottom, the opening in the zipper pocket. Now we're going to put it all together. So we're going to take our exterior and our lining right sides together. I find if you pull the flap through the opening in the bottom of the bag, it makes for turning easier when it comes to that, and much less bulk inside to squish all in it. But trust me, that having that flap through that bottom is definitely going to help later on. On our lining and main panels, we are going to match up our centers and secure with a few clips on both sides. Make sure everything is stuffed in, including the zipper panels and our handles and our D-rings and our zipper, everything. We don't want anything caught in that seam except for our lining and our main panels here. Especially our zipper tails. It would be sad if we accidentally sewn those in. Next, we're going to match up our side seams. If you can open those seams up, that would be golden, because then we won't have as much thickness there when we're sewing through it, especially if you are on a domestic machine. You'll do the same with the other side seams, and then go ahead and clip all the way around, evenly distributing that fabric. If I was on my flatbed, I would go ahead and sew these together from the inside of the bed with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're like me on a cylinder arm or you have a free arm, definitely do it this way and go ahead and sew around with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you're all done that, go ahead and turn your bag through the hole, the opening in the bottom. This is where you're going to be glad that you had your flap started, because once that flaps through, it comes through so easy. So pull through the flap, pull through the bottom, and then the rest should come nice and effortlessly. Reach in through the opening and poke out all of your seams. Making sure everything was caught, and then go ahead and stuff your lining into the inside of the bag. Now what we want to do is, there are two ways of doing this. Now if you are on a domestic and your machine can't handle the thickness, have your zipper panel facing up so you're not sewing through it. I'm on an industrial, so I'm going to actually fold my zipper panel down like so for when I'm top stitching, but I think this way would definitely be really thick for a domestic machine. So if you're on a domestic, I would recommend having the zipper panel up to avoid some of that frustration of sewing through that thickness, unless you know your machine can handle it. I love this pattern as it has the options for if your machine does not like thicknesses, or if you're on industrial like me and it can handle it. So go ahead and top stitch all the way around here with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that's done, so let's close up the bottom of the bag, open up your zipper pocket, reach in through that opening to grab the opening in the bottom of the bag to pull through the zipper pocket, line up your raw edges and sew them from where your stitching had stopped previously with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to close up that opening. Once that's done, stuff the lining back in, make sure everything was caught, take a peek in the bottom, mine is good, and then you can go ahead and top stitch with the folded edge, or the raw edges folded in of the lining zipper pocket to close up the hole. So at this point, if you're going with the option 1 finish where you're not top stitching these sides, where you tuck them in like this and go around and top stitch, put on your zipper pull, put on your zipper end, check out your work, and you are done. Now, if you are doing option number 2, you will have clipped all of your side gussets like you see I have done here. And we are going to top stitch all the way around this gusset with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Keep in mind, especially at this top seam where I'm starting here, it is very, very thick. So please make sure you know what your machine can handle when it comes to doing the thicknesses in these seams, because you do not want to get frustrated. It looks lovely both ways. Once both sides are all top stitched, this is what it looks like for the option to finish. Equally as beautiful. Admire your work, pat yourself on the back, and then we're done. All right, that's it. That's all. Isn't that an amazing make? It's not too bad at all. I hope you guys liked both finishes. I think both ways is absolutely beautiful. I definitely will be making more of these. I just think they are such a classy looking bag, and it's definitely my favorite of the Catsiopeia patterns. I just love it. Anyways, if you did like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. If you'd like to join any sew-along classes, that is down below in the description how to do that. And besides that, and if you'd like to support my channel further, you can always buy me a coffee. That link is down below in the description. So yeah, until the next one, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.